My name is Denny Henson, and I'm interviewing Stephen Neal as part of the Utah Humanities Grant titled New Tales for Old Trails to Utah, Oral Histories by the People Who Discovered Them. Today is Tuesday, September 2nd, 2025, and we're recording this oral history at Stephen Neal's home in his studio in Heber, Utah. I would like to remind everyone that this project is being sponsored by the Oral History Grant from Utah Humanities, the Utah Historical Society, and funding from the National Mormon Trails Association and the Mormon Battalion Association. Today we're talking with Stephen Neal, as I mentioned, who professionally has spent his career as a plastic surgeon, but now he's a full-time sculptor and painter. He's interpreting stories and events through his creative works for the Mormon Pioneer Story and others. For the focus of this interview, we're going to be talking about his research and production journey of the two Mormon Battalion sculptures titled Duty Calls and Duty Triumphs. And you can find these at This is the Place Heritage State Park in Salt Lake City, Utah. Stephen, thanks for being with us today.
You're welcome. Thank you for doing this. So you ask the questions and I'll tell you everything I need to know.
Sounds good. All right. Well, we're going to get more into the details of the battalion sculptures as we go along. But first, I'm really interested in how a plastic surgeon becomes a sculptor and if you liked Play-Doh as a child.
Actually, I don't remember Play-Doh so much, but there never was a time when I wasn't doing some kind of an art project. Even as a little child, I was always drawing and then painting in acrylics and pen, and did psychedelic posters in the 60s for my friends. And then I got this notion that I would do something more lasting. I did a 10 feet long by 5 feet tall. You can look at it. It's in the garage if you'd like to. That's 50 life-size birds. Took me 2 years to do it. I did that when I was 15 until I was 17. And I never took an art class. It was all done by myself. And the art teacher in high school saw it and gave me a scholarship for art and go to college. I did not want to be a professional artist, raise my family. Artists are poor, especially starting out. So I also was wired for science. And so I went into surgery, medicine. And actually, I was headed into urology. And remember, I would do some paintings on the side. It was a hobby. I did take one art class from Gary Smith at BYU when I got back from my mission because I said, hey, I should develop this a little bit. But I went into medicine. And if you can believe it, I was headed into urology. My friend, closest friend, we were both going to do urology and be partners. And then I saw rhinoplasty. Rhinoplasty is shaping the nose. I watched that as a medical student, and I had already was applying for residencies in urology. I saw that, and I went, wow, you can do this on humans. I did do wood carving in Boy Scouts, neckerchiefs, and did that very diligently. But so I changed. I wanted to do plastic surgery. Now, there's two great fields. You can go to general plastic surgery or facial plastic surgery, which is a little more regional and specialized. And in order to do facial plastic surgery, you have to do otolaryngology. That's ears, nose, and throat. So I changed from that, and I went to residency in San Diego, and that was, I think, key to going to San Diego because the residency there was called otolaryngology, head and neck surgery, and it included facial plastic surgery. Even as a resident, I was doing that, not just ears, nose, and throat. And a man by the name of Leslie Bernstein, who was preeminent in my specialty, came to San Diego looking at becoming the chief. We've lost our chief. He retired. And I knew he liked art because I'd gone to some of his lectures and national conventions. And I said, hey, look at this art I did. I'd done a number of Book of Mormon paintings by then. He said, this is really amazing. He says, "Have you ever thought of doing sculpture?" And I said, "Well, I always thought I'd like to go learn how to carve marble." And he said, "Oh, it takes so long. You need to get into clay right away." And why should I do that? It's very easy. Um, Facial plastic surgery is mastered by people who understand dimensions, and they can picture things. If you know anything about left brain, right brain physiology, neurophysiology, uh, the left side of the brain is our dominant side of the brain for most Americans. Right-handers are 90 something percent, and then maybe about 10% are left-handed or less. And of those, only half are purely right-brained. In other words, their functions are flipped in these people. Left-brained people, like most of us, that's what I am. That's where reasoning is, mathematics, communication, speech. The right side of the brain is more intuitive. That's where shapes live. That's where recognition of faces and directions. And it's wordless. There's no language there. And what I didn't know was when I went into surgery and so forth, that I was wired on both sides of my brain. Most people that I encountered were not. They were strongly left brain people. So these people are selected to go into facial plastic surgery or certain plastic surgery by left brain attributes, because that's how you get into medical school. And so some of them, when they start doing surgery where you're changing shape and improving aesthetics and so forth, a little bit like a fish out of the water. People who are tone deaf, but they want to sing and do music. That's the way it was. So I believe Leslie Bernstein, and I took up sculpture. In fact, I had my first lesson with the art professor at UCSD, and he told me what instruments to get, gave me, this is the clay you should buy, and I started working on it, obviously, as a resident. And I did that to make me a better facial plastic surgeon, not because I knew I was going to do the Mormon Battalion monument or this Monument of Americas that I'm working on now. I did it to make me a better facial plastic surgeon. So that's where all the errors are made, is in judgment, not in technique. And that's what that's what sculpture teaches you. For 15 years, I went to Leslie Bernstein's The Art of Rhinoplasty, and I took clay faces, and I would give exercises to the surgeons who would attend that. Over the years, probably more than 1,000 surgeons I've worked with clay faces. I would cut the nose off of one and just give them a face of a young girl without a nose. Those were advanced. I said, create the clay and put a nose on this girl that you think looks great. And then to the beginners, I put on a very large, oversized, masculine nose onto this girl's face. And I said, carve this down to make it look like you think is good. So we did that off and on for at least 15 years until I just got too busy and couldn't do it anymore. Leslie passed away. But the Art of Rhinoplasty was the longest ongoing rhinoplasty course in the United States. So like 52, 53 years before he finally passed away. So I was part of that. And that's what got me into doing sculpture. Now, I did that for about 10 years until, well, the way I look at it, until the Lord made something out of it. And I was inspired to do other things and much more serious.
Interesting. So I guess just not knowing anything about plastic surgery, can I ask, is that what you would actually do for people that you were doing?
Like rhinoplasty?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's
what we did.
Make clay.
That was my favorite operation. You do it on humans. Go to the operating room and try to reshape their nose. Rhinoplasty is unique in that it's actually probably the most difficult plastic surgery operation there is to consistently get good results, because you can change the nose more radically than you can do other things. If you're doing, breast reconstruction with the latissimus dorsi muscle, or if you're doing facelifts and so forth, there's only so much you can do. It's more technique oriented, but still you do things to try and make it better. But the nose, rhinoplasty, It's really, if you mess it up, I mean, Michael Jackson, case in point, you can really burn bridges depending on what you do. So people who really master it, they have to do hundreds of them before they really feel like they're a master. And I gave people a way to try and get there faster by doing sculpture and trying to, visualize what's not there, or how much is too much, how much is too little. Nobody can make you, you have to learn that by yourself. You can learn a technique, but nobody can give you judgment. So all of us as surgeons, we think back in our beginning years, and maybe even not beginning years, and we're going, oh, gee, I wish I'd never done that operation, or I wish I'd have done that differently, messed it up. I could have done better. That's a specter that haunts us, and sculpture would give us a way to try. One last point on that, the American Academy of Facial Plastic Reconstructive Surgery, which I was a fellow and active in for 40 years, we started actually an art class. We called it Aesthetic Boot Camp. We would do that up in upstate New York. One of my mentors was Gary Sussman. He was a professor at the New York Art Students League, where I met him. And he and I would actually do this together. And we would open it up to maybe 10 surgeons, because it was 1 week long, maybe as many as 20. The main people who wanted to come to that were presidents and past presidents of the academy. They knew how valuable this was. We always had a hard time getting the young surgeons to go to this, to pay the money, to take a week off from their practice. They're interested in techniques, interested in making money, paying off debts, And so it was always a hassle. But people who really know understand just how important that is.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for giving me that background. Can you walk us through the genesis, the beginning? How did this even come about, your idea to do the battalion sculptures?
For the Mormon Battalion monument. Yeah. I was already engaged in trying to build the Monument of Americas. I was doing some small pieces, and you have to understand that. This sculpture part, which we're building here in Heber, I've been working on that for 30 years. So in small concepts and small pieces to begin with, knowing that one day we would enlarge them. And I was working with some of the senior authorities in the church, and one of them in particular said, it was Boyd K. Packer, President Packer, he says, this is too big to start off with. You need to do a smaller project. And at the time, so I lived in Pendleton, Oregon, and in Walla Walla, which is in the same diocese of the same state, was a man, Lynn Teglin, whose ancestors were in the Mormon Battalion. And they were talking about doing a memorial sculpture for that. And it was, Lynn found out about this anyway. He knew that I did sculpture, and he says, hey, Steve, look at this. They're wanting a sculpture. And I think what was nice is they didn't have to pay me. I did it for free, totally free. And so I think that, let's see, I have to remember his name now. Paul, Brother Paul. Was it David Paul? No. Robert Pettigrew Paul, Bob Paul, that's his name. So he contacted me and said, are you interested in doing this? If you'd like to do that, I've got the material for you. You can read up on it and so forth. So I came down from Pendleton, met with him in his house over in Cottonwood Heights, I guess, in the Salt Lake Valley, and we discussed it. And so I was excited about that. This was really something that I could do. Didn't know how long it would take, but I was willing to do it. And so he gave me a book. He says, here, start reading this book. It was John Taylor's story and William Hyde sergeant. He was one of the sergeants, and reading their works. And so I read that whole book, thinking about it, and that whetted my appetite to learn more about some of these people. He also gave me a copy of David Pettigrew, who was his great grandfather, who was considered to be, they called him Father Pettigrew. He was the oldest member of the monument. Of the Mormon Battalion. And he gave me some of his diary to read as well. So that's how I got started on it. And then, so I had to come up with a concept. At that time, it was one sculpture. And after I'd read about it and how many things, it was not like they'd go to war, but yet they all carried those 20-pound guns for 2,000 miles. The only thing they ever shot was a bull. Never engaged in battle, but yet very dramatic piece of human drama because many of them got sick. They had to make a whole sick ensemble or group that then went to Colorado, peeled off. And so not everybody made it to San Diego, blazing the trail. So I'm thinking, all right, there were the bulls, they had guns, but they also were pioneers. They helped build San Diego. I mean, they made brick factories, they laid down sidewalks. Some of them split off and went to Los Angeles at that place there, and they were helping to colonize. So I'm thinking, okay, shovel, rifle, there were women with them. They were the laundresses, and of course, Melissa Burton Corey went with her husband. She got married a week before they left, or maybe 2 weeks, and then got hired on by the Army to walk with them. So she walked all the way across. There was only one other woman that made it. Most of them peeled off with the sick detachment that went to Colorado, but she went all the way with her husband clear to San Diego. And so I was thinking I wanted to put her in there, at least to honor the women that marched. And I came up with there were maybe 7 figures in it, all together doing different things. This is a funny aside because President Packer had kind of taken me under his wing. He liked to, and I said, "You want to see what I'm working on?" And he brought in Elder Ballard, M. Russell Ballard as well. And I showed him this clay sketch. The figure's only about this tall. Put it on his desk, and I was explaining it and going this and that, and he goes, "Hold it, hold it, hold it." And then he looks at me and says, "You're trying to say too much. May I touch this?" I said, "Sure." So I give him this figure, slid it over, it's all clay. And he ripped off this, and there, that's better. And afterwards, it's funny too, Larry Miller was with me at the time, Larry H. Miller, who was interested in doing this. And he said, "Did you see Elder Ballard's eyes when he did that?" And I said, "No." He says, "They were this big." So he was pretty amazed. I thought it was okay. So that's how we actually tried to simplify it. Instead of one, we would do 2 sculptures. And I says, it has to be heroic size. And what is heroic size? Larger than life. I wanted to do them twice life size. And it's, by the way, if you don't know, that's the largest sculpture in Utah, that bronze sculpture that we made. And will be until we finish the Monument of the Americas. There's some bigger ones in there. So we did it small, so it was done small first. And I spent maybe, because I was raising my kids still and serving the church and doing surgery and seeing patients. So it was almost a year, I think, before I came up with something acceptable in the first one and showed people what we wanted to do. And I remember moving things around. The first one was where they left from Iowa and Mount Pisgah, and before the actual enrollment or creating these different groups within the Mormon Battalion. And then the second one was when they actually arrived. It was supposed to be the moment that they see the Pacific Ocean, 2,000 miles away. So these 2 sculptures I created, first of all, the one, and then after I had that cast into bronze, then we started working on the other one. In fact, I was working on the other one. The second one's small. We call that a maquette. I was working on that one. It was bigger, a little heavier, while I was enlarging the first one. And that the enlarging process is interesting.
Yeah, walk us through the process.
So after you do one small and you think it looks great, there's a lot of time actually spent in that. In the old days, then you would use calipers, and by enlarging different dimensions, X, Y, Z axis, you would then create a larger one by using enlarging calipers. I never did that. I did that in Rome, Pietrasanta. I did it in Italy when I was learning how to carve marble. I used the ancient way that's been used for thousands of years. But here in the States, we just scanned it. This is new technology back then. Scanned it, and then using computer, CNC is the abbreviation, was computer navigation. They then would burr out styrofoam in the size that I wanted. So Brigham Young was 10 feet tall in this, twice life size. No, he's 12 feet, 12 feet tall, because he was a little under 6 feet, so it's about 12 feet tall. So this big blue statue of styrofoam is what I got while I was working on the small one. Then you put that in your studio and stand back and look at it and what's wrong with it, because there's always some distortions. But if you take something too small and you make it really big, you'll see when you look at the product, things have to be changed and moved around. So I would remember, get out the carpenter saw, and I'd saw these pieces off, and arms or legs, and move them around and glue styrofoam in there, work on that for a while. And then you would cover that entirely in clay and resculpt it. So that process of, there's Brigham Young, and then there's a family that basically is getting split up. Father had to go march and left a baby in arms of his wife, and his daughter, who's at his knees, saying, "I don't want you to go." So I sculpted that in my studio while I'm doing the smaller one of what I call duty triumphs. Why did I need duty calls, duty triumphs? Duty was the big thing. Why did these people do that? They did it for duty. And duty for the country, but also duty for their families and the people who were stranded, had been kicked out, pushed out of Illinois, Missouri. You know, they were out in the wilderness, and President Brigham Young made it clear that they were poor, they didn't have any money, that if they could create a battalion, they could get enough money that they would use to have the saints exodus from these Mount Pisgah and winter quarters, where they were just encamped with very little, and move them to the west, to Utah. So they knew, these Mormon Battalion people knew, yes, we'll fight in the war against Mexico, but we need the money. We need also the country to recognize that we do have loyalty to the United States of America, even though they've been expelled. So that's their duty. They knew that, and I wanted to, emphasize that it wasn't easy, but it was duty and duty calls. So that's why I thought of that. So after I was putting clay, I worked on that for maybe a year to try and get that right up in my studio in Oregon, while I was also making the smaller one. But then from that, just so you know the process, that piece that I had, twice life-size figures, Brigham Young was 12 feet tall, so it gets pretty massive. So I had the people from the foundry come in there, and together we cut that up into pieces. That was sculpted, I believe, in about 80 pieces, 80 or 85 different pieces. So they cut this off, big chunks, mold them. Silicon paint goes over that. It's a kind of a mold, but silicon, so high value, soft when it dries. paint that and build up different layers. Then after they get a certain thickness of that, they put what they call the mother mold. And what they would do is shoot fiberglass and make a hard shell that had seams that you could peel apart, and the soft parts, they also are made so that you can peel that off in sections. And then you have the soft inner mold, and you've got the mother mold. Then you pull that apart after it's all dry, pull that apart, and you throw away the original. The original is destroyed in the process of doing that. So now you only have the mold. So you go to the wax room, and then this piece usually has an opening, and you would pour well melted wax in there, swirl it around. They used to have pieces all the way around, and they would go around each piece, put hot wax in there, roll it around. So you get the wax to about the thickness that you would want, about that thick. Then you open up the mold, and you take that wax out of there. Now you go to the slurry room. In the slurry room, you first start by dipping it into a solution, looks like antifreeze. It's wet, and then you put a very fine powder, a silica powder over that, silica sand, and then let that dry. And you do the same thing with that process. Then you dip it again, build up a little coarser, a little thicker, until you get a hard shell that's about this thick. So that's about what, ½ inch, 3/4, 2/3 of an inch. And then when it's rock hard, very hard, you put that into the oven. And in the oven, that silica kind of turns that silica even harder, like pottery, but it melts out the wax. And then you take this hollow shell, put that into a trough of sand, melt the bronze up to, 1600, 1700 degrees, and then pour that into that shell. After that cools, you break the shell off, and now you have all of these pieces of bronze, and you weld that together and rebuild the sculpture. So that's how those sculptures were made, and that's why they're so expensive too. The process is very exhaustive. You could make 2 of them if you wanted, but those molds were destroyed. We never made a second one. And it's an expensive process. The styrofoam, that was what, $12,000 to do that styrofoam. To mold it then was another $40,000 or $50,000, and then to cast that was $150,000 or so. All of those sculptures together, I think, $450,000 15 years ago. They'd be at least $600,000 today to do those. So how do you come up with all the money? I have to say that it was Larry Miller and his generosity. And I was grateful to him, and I says, let me sculpt you in here. And I did. I sculpted Larry Miller into there as the patriot that's holding the flag when they arrived at San Diego. So that's how the process, and of course they patina, and then they'll fire that with a torch and spray chemicals on it to get the colorings that you want. That's the process.
Wow, that's fascinating. That was one of my questions. Did you use models?
I did. I did use models.
Were they significant to the story?
Some of the models just came out of my head. The Brigham Young was an interesting thing. That was a plastic surgery exercise. I could not find, you always start with a profile when you're trying to do either paint a person and I painted a number of paintings, obviously, but when you're painting or when you're doing sculpture, you start with the profile. The only profile I could find from Brigham Young was about a year before he died. So he's in his 70s and was in Salt Lake. But I took that profile and then I used plastic surgery techniques to de-age him. He had false teeth and for a long time. And over time, the maxilla of that's the upper jaw, you lose volume. And so the lips turn in, and that's part of the reason his smile was the way it was. Not only that, but then the nose loses support. And so what we call the nasolabial angle becomes more acute and the tip drops. So what I did, and then of course there's the malar eminences, the zygomatic bones, they will atrophy in time, things kind of droop and sag. I gave him a little more strength, the brow and in the cheeks. I put the tip of his nose, brought it up because he was in his 40s when they left to do this. And so I have Brigham Young standing there calling the Mormon Battalion, And um, the sympathy was exactly, we put that quote at the foundation with William Hyde. He says, most of the Mormon battalion had families and they had to leave them. And so this sacrifice of leaving, not knowing, they didn't know that they were going to come back, and many of them died. Some of them never did see their families again. But I had this unknown man, just a rank and file man who is leaving. And William Hyde was talking about he had to leave his children in the care of his parents with his wife who was expecting. So I put a little infant in her arms, and then, of course, the little girl was grabbing Dad's knee. I don't want you to go. And Brigham Young is looking out with his hands outstretched. You're going west. And the man is clasping his family, but looking that direction because he knows he has to leave. That's what I wanted to convey.
Oh, neat. Well, did you have any ancestors in the battalion? I guess
No, I did not.
Ask that.
No, they adopted me in. But I found out doing genealogy with this and that. President James Polk is the one that commissioned them. I found out he was my first cousin, 13 times renewed.
Oh my goodness.
Or removed. James Polk, President Polk was my first cousin, 13 times removed. So I did have a connection after all.
All right. Well, you've already talked about your research a little bit. You've read the books. What other kind of methods did you research?
Oh, I talked with Norma Ricketts. She passed away just shortly before this was unveiled, as she wrote the book, of course. I think her ancestors were in the battalion. I also felt like I wanted to go to San Luis Rey. That's where they arrived. That's why I did have a thought to march their trail with your husband. That never materialized. I wanted to do at least part of that. But I did drive. I flew down to San Diego. I was in the vicinity anyway, so I rented a car and drove there. Because these people had gone through the desert. They were starving. I think the average weight loss was 40 pounds. Most of them didn't have shoes. Why didn't they have shoes? They had money for that. They gave all the money to their families and to Brigham Young. So they just, with what they had, marched until these clothes fell off, So I wanted to go and kind of, how would it be? Because it would probably more like, gee, I've arrived at the Garden of Eden after all of this out in the desert. And the mission had been abandoned, but that was a place that they could stay. And so I wanted to go there. David Smith, one of the battalion members, died and was buried in the graveyard there. And I just kind of wanted to go feel things. So I went down there. They don't know where that grave is. One of the members described in detail where they buried him by such and such, but those markers are gone now. But he's in the graveyard there somewhere. And Steve and Neal was down there just trying to catch a feeling how they felt. And so I was in the process of creating the second one at that time. And that's when they arrived. So I read other, different passages in different books until I felt like I knew enough about them that I could put myself in their place.
And that's interesting that you said you wanted to feel it, because I just interviewed another artist and her goal is to show the emotions. Is that something you were trying to do as well?
Absolutely.
In the faces.
Yep, I did. So when I was composing that one, there were some of those scenarios that I think were powerful. When they were going through some of them, I don't think they could have made it if they did it in the summer. They went in the winter. But they left in the winter and then arrived there in January, February. And but when they were going through there, they, of course, had to find water, and sometimes in a 20-mile stretch there was no water. And they're working, it's still warm, they run out of water. And some of the marching people would just drop out. They would get into the shadow of a bush, a rock or something. And then when the battalion would arrive at their campsite where they could have water, people would fill up canteens and go back for their friends, and in one case, their brother. In fact, it was Orrin Hatch. It was surprising to me that Senator Hatch must have been some relative relation, but Orrin Hatch was a young boy. He was probably too young, 16, lied so he could go. And his older brother would come back and find him, give him water, and then they would hobble together in the night, through the night, arrive at the camp just as it is dawn, it's breaking, and they're again heading off. So that was some grueling, and I tried to put that kind of a scenario in there, and you see one person who's giving another person water. They're trying to nurse him with some water so that he can march again. And the person is also being supported. You have to go in the back to see that his arms are being supported by two different members as well as getting water. So that interrelationship, how they had to pull together to be able to make it on the march, because it was a hard march, and when they ran out of shoes and they ran out of food, and their burros or mules were dying, they didn't let that go to waste. They'd eat the mule, but then they would skin off the hide off their legs and make some kind of a rawhide shoe, and they'd pull this mule up onto their basically the hide of the leg, and they would kind of tie a knot or somehow close that off so they could pull it up far enough that they would use that hide, or the mule leg hide, as a shoe. I put that on one of them as well. You can see that if you look on a monument. I tried to put that in there. And I made them a little bit skinny, and their clothes were falling off of them, because that's they look more like ragtag hobos than the military. But that was because of the sacrifice they did, given the money, instead of buying what they should have had to march across there. So anyway.
I appreciate your sharing that, because that was going to be one of my questions. Mm-hmm. What are some of the details that you put in there to try to convey?
Yeah, those details in there. And of course, I made sure that the guns were authentic. The Mormon Battalion Association made sure that I had some of the things that I needed so that they're authentic. And I did have maybe a couple members say, well, that's not authentic. And I said, I know, that's drama. I need to be able to show that some of these things, to try and put drama into the piece, it makes it interesting to look at. But they showed me the clothing, and then I, of course, put holes in them, and cloth around their legs. I mean, they would put anything they could, because they couldn't walk across all the rocks and barefoot in the sand. So whatever I could find to put on their feet. And of course, one woman, and she is supposed to be Melissa Burton Corey. And I used, as a model, Melissa Garth Ballard, who's the great great granddaughter of Melissa Corey. So I used her likeness, and I know she liked to do enactments and readings and dramas about her grandmother, great-great-grandmother. So I put her in there, of course. And Father Pettigrew, he had a Book of Mormon tucked. He always would pray with that, so his great-grandson said. And I used his great-grandson, Bob Paul. I used his face for his great-grandfather. So these people, I actually did use a number of faces, real people in that one. you can see Father Pettigrew praying, and he's got books stuffed in here like that. And Larry Miller, he's, because we all know he's a patriot, was a patriot. He's holding the flag. I even got to have access, at least pictures and so forth, of the actual flag that they took. It was that flag was kept in the family, but I was able to kind of sculpt that flag so people knew, make it authentic. Anything else I can think of there? I think that's all.
Well, when you were doing all this research and you've put in so much detail, what was one of your most valuable resources, do you feel like, to help this all come together?
Well, they're diaries. I didn't feel like I could call it authentic unless I could have somebody talk about it. And between that and then just picturing this in my head, what that might look like, using models. I used the Mormon Battalion Association. I videoed them, took pictures of them so that I could make them look like that. And they assured me these things were authentic.
A lot of research has been done about the battalion recently with original documents, so a lot of really fun stuff is coming out now, and you would love that. Well, was there anything in all this research that surprised you or that really had a powerful impact on you?
I guess because I didn't know the story very much at all when I was asked for me to do all that research. That was refining. It was a wonderful experience to do that. I still get emotional. Yeah.
I can tell that touched you.
We have it real easy in our world. Yeah.
Okay. What do you consider some of the obstacles you had to overcome for this project?
Well, money. How are you going to do this? I asked Larry if he would. I says, if I create the sculpture, would you pay for the sculpture? And well, let me think about that. Was his first thing that he said. But then when he knew that some other people, when Elder Ballard was so enthusiastic about it, that piqued his response. And we were looking. I wanted Larry to come, and we met with Elder Ballard. Another funny aside, I said, "So we can meet with President Packer too?" And he goes, "No, he's too dangerous." He was talking about when he ripped my sculpture. So we just met with him, and I remember. Well, I showed him some of the figures. They were about this tall by then. I brought that to Salt Lake, and he said, "Let's move this around." And so we swapped figures so that when a person other than me looked at it, they could interpret correctly. They weren't interpreting always the way I did. So I moved the figures around and so forth. I remember at that time that Elder Ballard says, "Well, who's paying for this?" And Larry spoke up, "I'm paying for it." So that was the time I knew he was going to do it. But I was well into creating the maquettes. Not knowing if actually we had anybody pay for that. So that was one obstacle. Then, unbeknownst to me, there were lawsuits galore going on up there. I learned a little bit about politics. This is the place, Heritage Park was suing the Mormon Battalion Association, and the Mormon Battalion Association was suing the Heritage Park. They didn't tell me about that. I was up there in Oregon busy working on this. I've learned that if you're doing any great sculpture project, you want to limit how many people have a say in what you're doing, because disagreements can become big enough sometimes that it rips it apart. So I learned that. And doing this Monument of the Americas, there's really only one person making big decisions. That's me. I do have lots of counselors, but I'm the one that gets to make the final decision. So I don't have a committee. I have advisors, and we have board of directors. It's 501c3, and got everything legal and so forth, but I'm still the one that makes all the decisions. So I learned that from the Mormon Battalion sculpture, because we came close to not being able to do it. So those two things. And the other one was just a given, but I'm blessed with that. I have inexhaustible energy. I've always had a ton of energy. So not only did I do that thing, and then I was called to serve as a bishop in my ward, and the Mormon Battalion Association wanted their sculptures. And so a friend of mine suggested you should get together with Michael Hall. You can probably use him. He's an up-and-coming sculptor. So that's how Michael Hall and I became associated with each other. It was 20 years ago. And he is the other main sculptor who's doing the Monument of Americas. So we two together have done that. And Michael would come up to Oregon and stay for days and work on it. I would tell him what I wanted to do so that I could do my work, which, I couldn't do the sculpture at the time. But energy, you got to have commitment. You got to have a good work ethic to do something so big and finish it. I love to finish projects, and I've got a lot of big paintings and big sculptures. And I guess that's one of my skills, is that I can get it finished, not just started.
One of the things that was going through my mind is, okay, they're delivering you this 12-foot styrofoam thing. Mm-hmm. You have to have space.
Yeah, I built a studio on my house.
Okay.
Yeah, it was 17 feet from the top of that floor to the bottom, so I could do it.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Were there any obstacles in terms of, did any of the parts break and have to be redone?
One day I came in and found the head of the woman laying on the floor. It fell off from that damaged it. When it gets warm in the summer, the clay gets soft. And so things that aren't properly supported will bend with the weight. The clay becomes very heavy. The styrofoam is a modern invention, and it's a godsend to sculptors. In the old days, we used chicken wire, and you had to learn to weld. I don't know how to weld. I would have. If we lived in an older days, I would have had to learn how to weld. But you have to weld the armature. That's the skeleton that holds it together. And wood, and then chicken wire, and then put the clay over that. And it's very heavy. So with styrofoam, things can stand alone to quite a height sometimes because it's strong and light. And then if you carve that close enough, that's what this is, a styrofoam with clay over it. So if you make it thin enough, then it's not so heavy. But the head of that woman got pretty heavy because I built it out pretty high. So what did I do? I climbed up on a ladder, I drilled a hole in the ceiling, suspended a wire, put a big eye hook, an eye connector in her head, and put that on there so it would never fall again. Redid it again. So I want to make sure that didn't happen again.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing. I had a friend that did that with his Christmas tree. So I'm just imagining the wire in the Christmas tree, the head in the Christmas tree.
Yeah.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, well, the head, was this big. And that's interesting. Yeah, I said I enlarged it to twice my size, and you think, oh, it's okay. It's just, but it's three-dimensional. So it's 2 times 2 times 2 is 8 times. So it's 8 times the volume is twice life size.
All right. So you learned about politics. What else did you learn by doing that project? You said it was a dry run. It helped you with these projects you're doing now.
I also learned how to, in doing any big project, you think it's just sculpture. A person who's writing about the Monument of the Americas being built looked at me and he said, well, a couple of the other sculptors, he said, they're good sculptors, but they could never do the Monument of Americas. Only you could do that. And I said, why is that? He says, because you're good at multiple facets. You know how, not just how to sculpt, but you've got a mechanical sense of it. You know politics, and you know how to fundraise, and you know how to prepare things and keep this, which can become large, your association and supporting, how to keep them engaged. And that there's a lot of those things to learn. So to do a private park like this, it is quite a job. And, you have to learn all those things. Mormon Battalion Monument helped me learn that. I'm a lot better at it now.
Well, so tell me, what do you feel like you have brought new to the Mormon Battalion story?
Well, first of all, just the sheer size of it. People, when they get close to it, they feel better, I think, their contribution, that these guys are bigger than life. Had to be. All the Mormon Battalion now, Ed Frotton did one that was life size and a half. And it shows Mormon Battalion, single soldier holding a Book of Mormon. And that was down in San Diego at the site where they were talking about Mormon Battalion. Elder Ballard wanted a second copy of ours to be down there. Never worked out for political reasons within the church. But what I wanted to bring was a sense, having a single soldier never cuts it. I know, there's the single Revolutionary War soldier. There's if you go to Concord, across the bridge where the Revolutionary War started, there's a statue there of a single soldier. He's on a plowshare, which is supposed to have been beaten into a sword, but he's got a rifle. It's a single one, and it's very symbolic. This one, the shot heard round the world. I understand that. But a single soldier for the Mormon Battalion had been done twice that I know of, down in San Diego and then in front of the state capitol. I wanted something that showed the sacrifice, the camaraderie, the emotion of there's more than just one soldier fighting this. You know, there's the family they leave behind. There's their leaders. There's the politics of the nation. There's the struggle, just the physical to get there. This interaction that I created, I think that was unique. That wasn't something I added.
I agree.
Yeah, Daniel French. He's the guy that did that, very famous sculptor. Did that. Yeah, which I enjoyed going to Concord and seeing that. But anyway, yeah, President Pecker wanted me to do a single soldier. I didn't think I could do it. he spoke about that one.
He didn't tear all of them off except for one. Huh?
No, I did ask him if he wanted to unveil it, and he was relegated to a wheelchair by then. So it was Elder Ballard is his part to do unveil it. And Larry Miller couldn't, so Gail did unveiled it. That was so fun. And I arranged for music and everything, you know, to come. That was all I was doing. I wanted to have, that's showmanship too, you know, that's important. Have a big unveiling, people cheer and music. We're going to do that with the Monument of the Americas. See, there's more than just making clay. It's a presentation. It's theater.
So I want to go backwards for a little bit. How did you even meet Larry Miller?
I met him because of a sculpture. When you came in the house downstairs, you saw a sculpture just before you went up the stairs. It was of Moroni, Captain Moroni. I had a copy of that. It was in a church museum art contest. And Larry saw that there, and he was struck by it. He said, I want to buy that. So he had his secretary, Marilyn, that became a good friend of mine. She called me when I was up seeing patients in Oregon. And I was talking to her, and I said, let's see, Larry, you're Larry Miller. She just said Larry. I said, is this Larry Miller? yeah, at the Larry H. Miller, Utah Jet. Yeah. I said, okay, I'll let him buy it, but he has to have dinner with me. So I went to dinner with him and Gail, the first time we met, and struck up a friendship. There's also painting down there. You'll see he's in that as well. He came up to my house in Oregon. He posed for that. So um, he wanted to help me build a monument too, but then he passed away. He and I became good friends. So it was because of sculpture. He knew what I was doing. And, that's how that came. Well, it's a good thing. I mean, he's the one that paid for that. After he died, Gail says, yeah, well, he committed to that, so we'll honor that. Paid for it. That's how. So another benefit from the Larry H. Miller family to the state of Utah.
We've heard his name in other interviews, so he's been a good man.
Did so much
to support these things.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how has doing the Mormon Battalion impacted your focus? You said you've been working on the Monument to the Americas for 20 years.
30.
So tell us what's in the future for you in terms of trying to share and interpret history stories.
Well, there are 73 sculptures and counting in the Monument of the Americas. I've done 43 of them. Michael Hall's and another sculptor, Jeremy Hooley, has between them they have another 30. So I'm still using those same principles and trying to I'm using my knowledge as a surgeon, anatomy. So I like things to be anatomically correct. Studied, human anatomy well, altered it myself. And then try to come up with engaging poses or stories that people and it's not just, we do have some single sculptures in there. It has to be, but I like the group interaction. So we try to do that in the monument. Make it artistic so it's pleasing to the eye and try to tell a story. And one of the sections is about the founding of America as well, the founding fathers, some stories of miracles, even Harriet Tubman, the American Moses, trying to get slaves up. We've got a number of things we want to put into there besides the story of the Book of Mormon. And it's not just a Steve Neal Park or a Michael Hall and a Jeremy Hooley Park. We have people designing it. In fact, what's great is I have a team of over 20 people. They're all professionals, and none of them are paid. They're doing this because they can see the value for the community and for the state. We're putting this together. So we've got landscape architects, civil engineers, lawyers, architects, people in the media, BYU history professors. We've got a lot of people who are working to bring this off. And this project, obviously doing the Mormon Battalion, was kind of a preface for what I'm doing now. This will be my life's work.
Well, it sounds like you've been very successful at being able to help people catch your vision and want to be part of it. So that's great. Well, what would you say to the younger generation that's coming up behind?
Yeah, don't expect anything to be easy and just hand it to you. The world doesn't owe you anything. You have to go out and get it yourself. And work hard, really hard. You got an idea, a dream. That's the easiest part about a dream, is to dream it. You want your dream to come true. It's going to take a lot more work than you ever thought. And that's the only thing that's going to get it done. In my inspiration, I feel very much like the old masters. It's a few percentage of inspiration, 96% perspiration. It's hard work. So make sure that your dream is something that you can pin your aspirations and your work, your hard work on it, that it's something that you can do. And you may have to work up to it, do smaller projects. Because great dreams, I always like to say to people, young artists, there were thousands of Michelangelos, but we only know of one. All the other ones pooped out. They didn't have the posh, they didn't have the the stick-to-itiveness, the endurance. Hard things made them quit. And that's why we only know a few, these great masters. How did they do that? They did it with hard work, and they worked every day, and they gave up something too. I have been criticized by some of my children. I gave up something because I was so involved with so many professional things. But I remind them, I went to every dance contest you ever had. I got off work and went. You know, there was nothing you ever performed in, I wasn't there. So I'm always defending myself because they know that I was really involved in something. So you have to give up some things too in order for your dream to come true. It allows you to get the expertise, internet, connecting with other people. Sacrifice. There's a sacrifice. Make sure it's worth it.
That sounds like good advice to me.
It's advice to, it's good advice to anybody who has a dream.
Well, is there anything that as we've talked, that's come to your mind that maybe you didn't mention that you kind of...
Oh, probably. Just doesn't come to mind.
Anything else you'd like to say before we end?
Well, it was a great honor to be able to do that. And I couldn't thank Larry enough for the support and the money. I thank Gail, but there was a wonderful opportunity, and it's something that'll endure, it's last. It's still fun for me to go see that. And I'm being treated at the Huntsman Cancer Institute right now. And I always tell my nurses and the doctors, you just have to look out the window over there. You know, I did that.
Well, that's one of the things that's impressed me as we visited here is how people have come into your life. And you just mentioned it with your, there at the end, that you have to meet people and be in places where you can network. And a lot of blessings, it sounds like, have come to you from people you've met through your work, through your residency, things like that.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, the thought of that, that's an amazing thing. That, you know, from the realms of surgery, plastic surgery came this. Also, I have an what would I call him? A benefactor, a guardian angel on this project too. And I met him 12 years ago on a cruise to Antarctica. A cruise to the Antarctica. That's right. I was telling him about what I was doing, and he gets real serious. Came up after the presentation. I want to help. I had no idea this guy is millionaire. So we're doing this. We're raising money, but we also have this kind of this huge donation that he's put in his will. Okay, but that's our endowment fund. So we know this is going to go on in perpetuity. And there will be other people, other sculptors who will replace me, who will put sculptures in this park. Because we have a board, and it's an active thing that's going to go on for 100 years, hundreds of years, the way I see it. So, and then, you know, this Mormon Battalion sculpture was very instrumental in getting me to do this. So one thing leads to another.
And that's easy to see when you're our age. It's not so easy when you're young.
No, it's
but
not.
When you look
back. And one other thing is failure. You're going to fail. And if the failures are bad enough, this is to young artists and dreamers and builders. If the failure is so crippling and so traumatic that it stops you. That's the end of your dream. So every dream has to be met with the same kind of tenacity and dedication and determination that no failure is going to stop me, no matter how bad, because everybody fails. And I could go on and tell you some of the failures that I've had, where I thought people were going to donate, we were going to have land, and blah, 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 and then was a failure. And if you should just prepare yourself, failures cannot deter me. They can only delay me. That's important. Otherwise, forget it. It's just a dream.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I want to thank you, and also I want to give a big thank you to the organizations who have helped us have this opportunity to do these interviews. It's been an honor. This project is made possible through an oral history grant from Utah Humanities, the Utah Historical Society, and funding from the National Mormon Trails Association and the Mormon Battalion Association.
Awesome.